Through the echoing halls of forgotten empires, a chilling truth emerges: the relentless human pursuit of beauty. But what did beauty truly mean in a world unburdened by our modern gaze? Imagine a time when the very shape of one's skull was a canvas for status, when a young girl's feet were meticulously bound, her bones reshaped to fit a crippling ideal. Consider cultures where the eyes were not merely windows to the soul, but carefully crafted statements of pigment and purpose. These are not just tales of adornment, but profound sagas of sacrifice and identity. We journey now to an age where the body itself was a dramatic testament to belief, where every modification, every painful transformation, spoke volumes about a civilization's deepest desires and most unsettling aspirations. From the first fragile breath, life was a declaration. But in ancient worlds, for some, even the very shape of that nascent life was not left to chance. Imagine a destiny etched not in the stars, but into the malleable bone of a newborn skull. Picture the dawning of an age where status was not merely inherited or earned, but carefully, agonizingly, cultivated from infancy. Here, the pursuit of beauty, of belonging, of power, took a form so intimate, so invasive, it defies modern comprehension: cranial modification. It began almost immediately, sometimes mere days after birth. Before the fontanelles had fully closed, before the delicate skull had hardened, a deliberate artistry commenced. This was not a quick, painless procedure, but a sustained commitment. 4 months, sometimes even years, an infant's head would be gently but firmly bound. Wooden boards, padded cloths, or woven materials were expertly positioned, one across the forehead, another at the back of the head. Then, with steady, unyielding pressure, they were tightened day after day, week after week. Consider the mother, her heart perhaps heavy with an unspoken sorrow, yet bound by the fierce imperatives of her culture. Her hands, tender with maternal love, became the very instruments of this transformation. She would observe her child, their soft skull slowly yielding, stretching, elongating, or flattening into a desired, often exaggerated form. An infant's cries of protest were surely met with a mother's soothing, knowing this pain was a necessary sacrifice for a future of acceptance, of respect, of elevated standing. This was not child abuse as we understand it, but a profound act of love and societal adherence, a desperate attempt to secure the best possible future for one's offspring. The shapes varied dramatically across civilizations, each a unique testament to a specific aesthetic or belief. In ancient Peru, particularly among the Paracas and Inca cultures, some skulls were elongated to an astonishing degree, forming a cone-like peak. Imagine a head stretching upward, an almost alien silhouette against the desert sky. For the Maya of Mesoamerica, the ideal was often a flattened forehead, creating a distinctive, perhaps even formidable, profile. The Olmec even earlier may have sought a more rounded, bulbous form. Across Africa, in Sudan and Congo for example, specific tribal groups practiced variations, producing shapes that marked ethnicity and social standing. What drove such extreme dedication to reshaping the very vessel of thought? Foremost was often status. A distinctly shaped head was an unmistakable badge of nobility, of power, a visual marker that set the elite apart from the common folk. It proclaimed, without a single spoken word, a privileged class, pure lineage, and unassailable position in society. To possess such a head was to wear one's social ascendancy for all to see. Beyond mere status, these modifications were often deeply interwoven with religious belief. Some cultures believed that an elongated or flattened skull connected individuals more closely to their deities, perhaps mimicking the shape of revered ancestors or mythical beings. It might have been seen as a way to enhance spiritual receptivity, to open the mind to divine wisdom, or even to embody a favored animal, like a jaguar for the Maya, whose profile was often echoed in the cranial shape. The body in this context was a living prayer, a canvas upon which to physically manifest one's devotion and spiritual aspirations. Then there was the powerful pull of identity. In a world without national borders or widespread literacy, physical markers were paramount. A distinctive cranial shape could immediately identify one as belonging to a specific tribe, clan, or ethnic group. It forged an unbreakable bond of belonging, a shared aesthetic that united communities against the vast unknown. To look like your people, to bear the mark of your heritage upon your very skull, was to be accepted, to be protected, to be truly seen. And what a beauty! The very word seems inadequate to describe the profound, almost sacred aesthetics at play. For these cultures, the modified skull was not a deformity, but the epitome of grace, of power, of desirable form. It was a standard of perfection, a visual poem etched in bone. Imagine a young woman, her elongated skull adorned with intricate textiles and feathers, her face painted, her presence commanding attention and admiration. To her, this was beauty. To her community, this was breathtaking. It was the ultimate expression of human potential, molded and refined from the cradle. The process, however, was not without risk. While generally considered safe when performed by experienced hands, the constant pressure could lead to complications. Infections, discomfort, and even neurological issues were potential, if rare, consequences. Yet, the societal imperative was so strong, the benefits of conformity so overwhelming, that these risks were willingly, perhaps unknowingly, accepted. For the child, there was no choice. For the parents, there was only the fierce determination to give their child every possible advantage in a harsh and unforgiving world. Imagine for a moment being born into such a world. Your infancy spent in the constant embrace of wooden boards or tight bindings. Your first memories, perhaps, a dull ache, a feeling of constraint. You grow and the shape solidifies, becoming irrevocably part of who you are. You look at your parents, your elders, your peers, and you see the same distinctive contours. This is normal. This is natural. This is beautiful. This is your identity, crafted before you could even speak your name. This practice, spanning millennia and continents, from the Americas to Africa, from Europe to Oceania, speaks to a universal human drive, the desire to control and perfect the physical form to reflect an internal truth or a societal ideal. It reveals a profound willingness to endure discomfort, even pain, for the sake of belonging, of status, of perceived beauty. It underscores a fundamental difference in how different civilizations have defined the boundaries of human intervention upon the natural body. These cranial creations were not random acts of cruelty but carefully orchestrated cultural statements. They were the ultimate forms of personal branding, etched into the very core of one's being. They were declarations of identity, of belief, of power. They tell us that while our modern world grapples with fleeting trends and temporary adornments, ancient peoples were willing to reshape the very foundations of their physical existence to embody their deepest aspirations. The legacy of these shaped skulls, unearthed from ancient burial grounds, continues to whisper across the ages. Each silent, elongated or flattened cranium is a testament to the lengths humanity has gone, and perhaps will always go, to define, distinguish, and elevate itself in the relentless pursuit of an ideal. It forces us to confront the unsettling question: what extreme demands might our own unspoken ideals place upon us even today? And what indeed are these demands? Across millennia, across continents, humanity has relentlessly pursued ideals that, to our modern eyes, appear not merely strange but profoundly cruel. From the deliberate shaping of skulls to the enforced contortion of feet, the body has served as a canvas for the most extraordinary and often excruciating expressions of cultural aspiration. If the ancient cranial creations sought to elevate the mind, then another, equally enduring and far more pervasive tradition sought to capture and imprison the very essence of womanhood within a delicate, unnatural cage. This was the practice of foot binding in China, a ritual of beauty and suffering that would span 1,000 years, affecting countless millions of women, each one a living testament to the crippling power of an ideal. Imagine, if you can, a time when beauty was synonymous with agony, when femininity was measured not by strength, but by profound, deliberate weakness. Imagine a girl, perhaps just 4 or 5 years old, her world still a blur of nascent dreams and innocent play, suddenly confronted with a harsh reality that would define every step she ever took. Her feet, still soft and pliable, were about to become the site of a brutal transformation, a journey into perpetual pain in the name of an idealized aesthetic. This was not a choice, it was a destiny, woven into the fabric of a society that demanded its women be both objects of desire and symbols of social standing. The process began with the breaking. The young girl's feet would be plunged into warm water, softened by herbs, then her tiny toes, all but the big toe, would be bent inward and downward, pressed firmly against the sole. Long strips of cotton bandages, often 20 feet or more in length, would then be tightly wound around the foot, starting from the 4 smaller toes, pulling them underneath the sole towards the heel. With each turn of the bandage, a gasp of pain, a muffled sob. With each passing day, the pressure would intensify, forcing the arch to buckle, the bones to fracture and reset in grotesque new configurations. You might hear the faint cracking sound, a sound that signaled not brokenness, but the beginning of an unnatural perfection. The goal was the 3-inch golden lotus, a foot so small it would fit into the palm of a man's hand. This was the pinnacle of elegance, the ultimate mark of refinement and desirability. Yet to achieve it, the girl endured excruciating, relentless pain. The bandages were rarely removed, perhaps once every few weeks for cleaning, only to be rewrapped even tighter. Flesh would become infected, nails would grow inward, sometimes puncturing the sole. Toes would rot and fall off. It was a slow, deliberate mutilation, performed by mothers and grandmothers, women who themselves had endured the same torture, passing down not just a tradition, but a legacy of shared suffering. Think of the constant, throbbing ache, the burning sensation, the raw sores. Imagine the shame of the pus and blood, the fear of infection, the desperate longing for relief that never came. For these girls, play became impossible. Running, jumping, even simple walking transformed into a torturous act of balance and will. Their gait became a mincing shuffle, a delicate sway that was considered graceful, yet was born of severe disability. A woman with bound feet could not stand unaided for long, nor could she walk any significant distance. She was quite literally crippled by beauty. Why? Why would a culture impose such a devastating burden upon its women? The answer lies in a complex tapestry of social, economic, and aesthetic ideals. Bound feet were a potent symbol of status. Only a wealthy family could afford to have a wife who was unable to work, whose entire existence was predicated on her delicate, restricted movement. For a daughter to have unbound feet meant she was destined for a life of labor, a life without the promise of a good marriage. Thus, foot binding became an economic imperative for many families, a pathway to upward mobility for their daughters, however painful that path might be. It was also inextricably linked to notions of femininity and sexuality. The tiny, arched foot, perpetually hidden within embroidered silk shoes, was considered exquisitely erotic. The lotus gait, the teetering walk, was thought to be alluring, a demonstration of a woman's vulnerability and dependence, qualities highly prized in a patriarchal society. The hidden foot itself became a focal point of desire, its perceived delicacy intensifying its appeal. It was an intimacy shrouded in secrecy, a private perfection. For the women themselves, the psychological toll was immense. They lived with constant pain, with the knowledge that their bodies had been irrevocably altered, not by accident but by design. Their mobility was severely restricted, confining them largely to the domestic sphere. Yet, within this confinement, there was also a strange pride, a shared understanding among women who had endured the same rite of passage. They were golden lotuses, members of an exclusive sisterhood of suffering, their feet a badge of honor in a world that valued this peculiar form of self-sacrifice. But the cost was staggering. A woman with bound feet was essentially an invalid. Her life was circumscribed by her inability to move freely, to participate fully in the world beyond her home. Falls were common, often leading to broken hips or other serious injuries, especially in old age. The pain, though it might lessen with time, never truly vanished. It was a constant companion, a ghost of her childhood agony. This practice, born perhaps in the 10th century and enduring until the early 20th, resisted abolition for generations. Reforms were attempted, edicts issued, but the cultural inertia, the deep-seated belief in the beauty and social necessity of the golden lotus, proved incredibly resilient. Mothers, driven by love and the fierce desire for their daughters to have a good life, continued the tradition, even as the world outside changed. The last generation of women with bound feet are now very old, their lives a living archive of this extraordinary, painful custom. The story of the bound petal is a powerful, haunting echo of our opening question. It forces us to confront the deep, often terrifying intersection of beauty, status, and suffering. It reveals a world where the natural form was deemed insufficient, where the body was meticulously, painfully sculpted to meet an idealized vision. It tells us that the pursuit of beauty can be a journey not just of adornment, but of profound transformation, a transformation that leaves an indelible mark, physically and emotionally, on every person who walks its agonizing path. The ideals shift, the methods change, but the human willingness to endure for a perceived perfection remains a constant, unsettling truth. It begs us to look at our own unspoken ideals, the invisible chains we might wear, and to ask ourselves, at what cost do we pursue our own versions of the golden lotus? The agonizing path of the golden lotus, a journey of profound transformation and suffering, forces us to acknowledge a chilling truth. Across history, cultures have imposed their will upon the human form, reshaping it, sometimes brutally, to fit an idealized image. If the feet were the canvas for one civilization's desire to confine and perfect, then the eyes, those mirrors of the soul, became another's dramatic stage for an altogether different kind of power, a gaze that was both captivating and deeply unsettling. You stand at the precipice of a new mystery, a world where the very act of seeing and being seen was meticulously crafted, imbued with meaning that transcended mere aesthetics. Imagine a world where the eyes, not simply as organs of sight, but as portals to the divine, were transformed by ritual and artistry. This was no fleeting fashion. This was an enduring, deeply spiritual and undeniably bizarre standard of beauty that gripped the ancient world, from the sun-drenched sands of Egypt to the fertile crescent of Mesopotamia. Journey with me now to the banks of the Nile, to a civilization that understood the profound power of the human gaze. Here, beauty was not a gentle whisper but a thunderous proclamation, especially when it came to the eyes. For the ancient Egyptians, the eye was a cosmic symbol, a guardian against evil, a window to the gods themselves. And so they painted them. They sculpted them. They transformed them into something otherworldly, something almost divine. The word itself conjures images of mystery, of pharaohs and queens, of an age steeped in an almost hypnotic allure. But kohl was far more than just makeup. It was a shield. The searing desert sun, the ever-present glare, the irritating dust and flies, all conspired against the delicate human eye. Kohl, a dark, rich pigment derived from galena, a lead ore and sometimes soot or malachite, was believed to possess protective qualities. It reduced glare. It repelled insects. It even held antiseptic properties, protecting against eye infections in a land where clean water was often a luxury. But practicality soon blurred with profound spiritual significance. The thick, dark lines that extended beyond the outer corners of the eyes, often elongated to an almond shape, were not merely decorative. They mimicked the markings of the falcon god Horus, whose all-seeing eyes symbolized protection, royal power, and good health. To wear kohl was to invite Horus's vigilance, to align oneself with cosmic order. Men and women alike, from the lowliest peasant to the most exalted queen, engaged in this sacred ritual. Ramesses the Great, Cleopatra, Nefertiti, their images carved in stone and painted on papyrus, all bear the unmistakable dramatic imprint of the kohl-lined eye. This was not a subtle enhancement. This was a statement. The eyes, already the focal point of the face, became hyper-defined, almost disembodied in their intensity. You see them in every tomb painting, every statue, every surviving artifact. Those intense, almond-shaped gazes, sometimes serene, sometimes piercing, always profoundly aware. Think of the bust of Nefertiti, her eyes hollowed out, perhaps once inlaid with precious stones, but the kohl lines still starkly present, directing your attention, pulling you into her ancient, regal world. The process of application was itself a ritual. Finely ground kohl, often mixed with oil or water to create a paste, was applied with an applicator stick, usually made of ivory, wood, or even gold. The steady hand, the meticulous strokes, transforming the everyday into the eternal. And it was not just the lash line. The eyebrows too underwent a startling transformation. Plucked clean or nearly so, they were then dramatically redrawn, often in a high, arched, almost unnatural curve that further emphasized the elongated, kohl-rimmed eyes beneath. The effect was one of heightened emotion, of an unblinking awareness, an almost ethereal detachment from the mundane. Consider the discomfort the steady hand required, the potential irritation from lead-based pigments near such a sensitive area. Yet, for millennia this practice persisted. The beauty, the power, the connection to the divine, outweighed any immediate discomfort or long-term health risk. What does it say about a culture that so profoundly re-engineers the face, that takes one of our most natural features and transforms it into a symbol of spiritual and societal ascent? It speaks of a deep-seated belief in the ability of appearance to dictate destiny, to bridge the gap between mortal and God. But the obsession with the eye, with its power to command and to mystify, extended beyond Egypt's borders. Venture further east to the ancient lands of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, where Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians forged empires under the watchful eyes of their gods. Here too the eyes were paramount, though the expression of their beauty standards took on a slightly different, equally dramatic form. The Sumerians, creators of the earliest written language, depicted their gods and rulers with eyes of startling size and intensity, often inlaid with lapis lazuli or shell. These were not human eyes. They were the eyes of beings of immense power, of unblinking authority. And this idealized, almost alien gaze trickled down to mortal representation. For the Sumerians, a prominent, often conjoined eyebrow was a sign of wisdom, nobility, and profound connection to the divine. Imagine the elite of Sumer, of Akkad. Not only did they darken and elongate their eyes with substances similar to kohl, they also meticulously carved their brows into a single dramatic arch, creating a pronounced unibrow. If it did not grow naturally, it was drawn on, a bold, thick stroke connecting the two, framing the intense, kohl-rimmed eyes beneath. This was not about softness or natural allure. This was about starkness, about an almost severe beauty that proclaimed status and spiritual depth. You encounter them in the powerful statues of Gudea, the ruler of Lagash, his face serene, his eyes wide, his brows a thick, unbroken line, conveying an almost superhuman focus and piety. These were not casual adornments. They were integral to the visual language of power, of spiritual devotion, of a profound understanding of one's place within a cosmic order. To gaze upon such a face was to feel the weight of centuries of tradition, of an aesthetic rooted in a desire to transcend the purely human. Even in later Western antiquity, a fascination with the brow persisted, though perhaps with less of the dramatic, otherworldly intensity of Egypt and Mesopotamia. In classical Greece and Rome, while kohl was used, it was often with a lighter hand. But the unibrow or monobrow, known as a synephrys, held its own intriguing place. For Roman women, especially those of intellectual or artistic bent, a dark, well-defined brow, sometimes naturally occurring as a unibrow, was considered a mark of intelligence, seriousness, and even beauty. It was a sign of gravitas, of a thoughtful mind. They would use soot or crushed ants' eggs to darken and connect their brows, creating a seamless arc that conveyed depth and wisdom. Think of the Stoic philosophers, the poets, whose intellectual pursuits were reflected in their serious, often unibrowed visages. The intent was different from Egypt's divine connection or Mesopotamia's imposing authority, but the principle remained. The brow, and by extension the eye, was a canvas for conveying social standing, character, and an idealized inner world. From the protective kohl of the pharaohs to the wisdom-laden unibrows of Sumerian rulers and Roman intellectuals, the message is clear. Our ancestors understood the profound power of the gaze. They knew that by altering the frame of the eyes, by intensifying their expression, they could alter perception itself. They could transform a human face into a divine mask, a symbol of power, a shield against evil, a beacon of wisdom. These were not trivial acts of vanity. They were deeply ingrained cultural practices, often steeped in religious belief, social hierarchy, and a pragmatic understanding of the world. They were expressions of identity, meticulously crafted, sometimes at great physical cost, from ingredients that could be toxic, through processes that were undoubtedly uncomfortable. The application of kohl, the plucking and redrawing of brows, the shaping of an idealized unibrow, these were daily rituals that spoke volumes about an entire civilization's values. What does it mean to wear eyes that are not quite your own, to gaze at the world through a meticulously constructed, culturally dictated frame? It means embracing an identity that transcends the natural. It means participating in a silent, powerful conversation with your ancestors, your gods, and your society. It means that the pursuit of beauty in these ancient lands was a profound act of self-definition, a dramatic statement of who you were and perhaps who you aspired to be. The eyes of enigma, carved, painted, and intensified, stare back at us across the millennia. They ask us to consider the enduring human need to look beyond the ordinary, to infuse our very bodies with meaning, and to sometimes, quite literally, re-engineer our vision of perfection. And as you confront those ancient, knowing gazes, you might just find yourself asking, what unspoken messages do our own eyes carry, sculpted by the invisible hands of modern ideals? You have contemplated the eyes of ancient worlds, those intense gazes sculpted by desire and decree. Now shift your focus to the canvas beneath them, to the very skin that framed those windows to the soul. For in civilizations across the globe, reaching back through the mists of time, there existed a silent, powerful dictum about the ideal complexion, an obsession with paleness, a devotion to the untarnished, the porcelain white. This was not merely a preference. It was a profound statement, a declaration of status, purity, and a connection to something beyond the earthly sun. Imagine for a moment a world where the sun, giver of life and warmth, was also a marker of shame, its golden touch a branding iron for the commoner, the laborer, the one who toiled under its unforgiving gaze. To be pale was to be untouched by such burdens, to exist in a realm of leisure, of intellect, of the sacred. It was a visual shorthand for aristocracy, for those who lived lives of indoor comfort, shielded from the elements that weathered and darkened the skin of the working masses. This was the porcelain mask, meticulously crafted, painstakingly maintained, a testament to the dramatic lengths humans would go to embody an ideal. In the blistering sands of ancient Egypt, where the sun beat down with relentless ferocity, an intriguing dichotomy arose. While the men, often depicted with ruddy or bronze skin, embraced the outdoor life of hunting and warfare, the women of the elite were expected to maintain a lighter, almost ethereal pallor. This was not about avoiding all sun, rather it was about a nuanced distinction. A woman's lighter skin spoke of her sheltered existence, her delicate nature, her role as the mistress of the household, unburdened by the sun-baked fields or the dusty marketplace. To achieve this, she would mix white lead or chalk into her ointments, layering it onto her face and body, striving for a luminosity that defied the harsh landscape around her. It was a subtle yet potent symbol, an unspoken language understood by all. This woman belongs to a world apart, a realm of refined beauty and protected privilege. Travel westward, across the shimmering Mediterranean, to the classical worlds of ancient Greece and Rome, and you encounter the pale ideal reaching its zenith, celebrated as the very essence of beauty and divinity. Look upon the marble statues that endure to this day, and you will see goddesses, nymphs, and aristocratic women immortalized with skin as white as the stone itself. This was not an artistic embellishment, it was a reflection of the prevailing aesthetic. In these societies, a tanned complexion screamed of outdoor labor, of a peasant's life, of one subject to the whims of nature. A pale, almost translucent skin, conversely, whispered of refinement, of education, of a life spent in intellectual pursuits within shaded courtyards and grand villas. For the Roman matron, achieving this coveted paleness was an elaborate, often dangerous, ritual. She would slather her face with a concoction known as cerussa, a white lead paste that offered an astonishingly opaque, almost ghostly coverage. This was her everyday foundation, applied with a gravity that bordered on the sacred. To enhance the illusion of delicacy, she might even paint delicate blue veins onto her temples and breasts, mimicking the fragile transparency of truly pale skin. The dangers were immense, unbeknownst to them. Lead poisoning, a slow, insidious torment that could lead to disfigurement, madness, and even death. Yet, the allure of the porcelain mask, the unwavering pursuit of this aesthetic ideal, overshadowed any whispers of peril. It was a choice, a dramatic sacrifice laid upon the altar of societal expectation. Journey east, far beyond the Mediterranean, to the gilded courts of imperial China and the hushed tea houses of Japan, and the cult of paleness transforms into an art form, a profound cultural statement. Here, the white face was not just about avoiding the sun, it was about creating a canvas, a porcelain mask that transcended the natural, approaching an almost divine or otherworldly beauty. In ancient China, for aristocratic women, a pale complexion symbolized purity, status, and an aesthetic connection to the moon, to jade, to things serene and untouched. They used rice powder, ground pearls, and sometimes dangerously lead-based white paints to achieve an unblemished, luminous facade. This was often contrasted with vibrant red lips and dark, lacquered hair, creating a stark, breathtaking visual drama. In Japan, the iconic geisha perfected this art of the white face. Her elaborate makeup, with its thick layer of shironuri, a white lead or rice powder base, was more than cosmetics. It was a ritual, a transformation. Her face became a pristine mask, removing individuality to present an idealized, almost theatrical beauty. It spoke of discipline, of artistry, of a dedication to an aesthetic that bordered on the sacred. The white face was a symbol of purity, of detachment from the mundane world, inviting the observer to look beyond the ordinary, into a realm of curated perfection. Each brushstroke, each delicate line, contributed to the creation of a persona, a living, breathing work of art where the face itself became a silent, eloquent poem. The motivations behind this global obsession with paleness were multi-layered, a complex tapestry woven from ambition, fear, and a deeply ingrained sense of beauty. It was a fear of the sun, yes, but also a fear of being perceived as common, as unrefined, as belonging to the lesser echelons of society. It was an ambition to climb, to belong, to embody the very ideals of purity, divinity, and aristocratic grace. For many, the pale skin was a connection to the gods, an unblemished surface untouched by the grime and toil of the mortal world. It was a profound act of self-definition, a bold statement rendered in pigment and powder. Yet, this relentless pursuit came at a terrible price. Across continents and centuries, women and even some men risked their health, their sanity, their very lives for this ephemeral ideal. The insidious poison of lead-based cosmetics slowly ravaged bodies, leaving behind not radiant beauty, but disfigurement, illness and premature death. The porcelain mask, while beautiful, often concealed a silent, agonizing struggle, a testament to the immense pressure to conform, to achieve an unattainable perfection. The allure of ancient paleness stands as a stark, dramatic reminder of how profoundly different our standards can be, yet how universal the human drive to adorn, to transform, to sculpt the self into something deemed beautiful, something meaningful. These were not mere surface choices. They were declarations, acts of defiance against the natural order, attempts to elevate the human form into an ideal, no matter the cost. You are left to wonder, what hidden costs do our own modern ideals demand as we too pursue our contemporary masks of perfection? The ancient world's porcelain faces stare back, their silent beauty echoing a powerful, often tragic, truth about the enduring human struggle for identity, status, and the elusive ideal of beauty. The ancient world's porcelain faces stare back, their silent beauty echoing a powerful, often tragic, truth about the enduring human struggle for identity, status, and the elusive ideal of beauty. But if the quest for pale skin was a silent suffering, a hidden sacrifice, what then of the overt, almost violent, transformation of the mouth itself? What of the teeth, those hard, enduring instruments of survival, so often altered, adorned, and even sacrificed in the name of a beauty so alien to our own modern sensibilities that it stirs a primal sense of both awe and unease? Imagine for a moment a smile. Not one of simple joy, nor one of polite acknowledgement. Imagine a smile that glints with the deep, spiritual green of jade, or the stark, obsidian sheen of jet. Picture teeth not as uniform pearly whites, but as meticulously sculpted jewels, their surfaces bored, inlaid, and filed into shapes that speak of power, divinity, and an unyielding commitment to an aesthetic vision born from the deepest reaches of ancient civilization. You are transported now to the vibrant, teeming heart of Mesoamerica, to the towering pyramids and bustling plazas of the Mayan and Aztec empires. Here, in a world steeped in cosmology and ritual, the human body was a canvas for profound declarations, a living testament to one's place in the cosmic order. And few canvases were as dramatically transformed as the mouth. Consider the Mayan elite, their faces often painted, their bodies adorned with intricate textiles and feathers. But it was their teeth that truly announced their status, their connection to the sacred. For them, a flawless, natural set of teeth was not the ultimate ideal. Far from it. The goal was transformation, an elevation of the mundane into the miraculous. The artisan, a figure of immense skill and steady hand, would begin the harrowing process. You might imagine the air thick with incense, perhaps the low thrum of a shaman's chant. The patient, almost certainly a member of the ruling class, a priest or a celebrated warrior, would recline, steeling themselves for an ordeal that would redefine their very existence. With no modern anesthetics, only perhaps the numbing properties of certain herbs or the sheer force of will, the modification would begin. The tools were simple yet terrifyingly effective. A primitive drill, crafted perhaps from bone or obsidian, and a fine abrasive. The target, living teeth. The process, to meticulously bore a small, precise hole into the front surface of an incisor or canine. This was not a superficial etching. This was an invasive procedure, reaching deep into the enamel, sometimes even into the dentin, perilously close to the nerve itself. The pain, you can only imagine, must have been excruciating, a searing agony that tested the limits of human endurance. Yet it was endured. It had to be endured. For the reward was not merely beauty, it was spiritual resonance, an embodiment of the divine. Into these painstakingly drilled cavities, tiny, perfectly cut pieces of jade were then carefully set. Jade, a stone revered throughout Mesoamerica, held immense sacred significance. It was more than just a gem, it was considered the very essence of life, fertility, and royalty. Its cool, verdant depths mirrored the sacred waters of the underworld, the lushness of the earth, and the purity of the heavens. To wear jade in one's teeth was to quite literally embody these cosmic forces, to carry a piece of the divine within one's very smile. As the jade inlay was cemented into place, perhaps with a natural resin, the transformation was complete. Imagine the sight. A dignitary speaking, their lips parting to reveal not just teeth, but miniature glowing constellations of green, catching the sunlight, reflecting the torchlight. Each utterance, each laugh, each command would be accompanied by this subtle yet powerful display. It was a statement of profound wealth, certainly, but also of spiritual power, of connection to the very gods. It proclaimed, without uttering a single word, that this individual was not merely human, but touched by the divine, worthy of reverence. But the alterations did not stop at elegant inlays. For some, the ideal was not serene beauty but fierce, predatory power. You would look upon a warrior, perhaps, and see not rounded human teeth, but sharpened, menacing points, filed with incredible precision. This practice, known as tooth filing or dental mutilation to modern observers, was another common and dramatic form of body modification across various ancient cultures, including the Maya, the Aztecs, and even some African tribes. Imagine the skill required to transform natural teeth into jagged edges, into formidable fangs that mimicked the jaguars and serpents revered in their mythology. The process again would be agonizing, requiring chisels and abrasive stones to grind down the enamel and dentin, shaping the teeth into V-points, rounded points, or even bifurcated designs. The goal was often to evoke the power and ferocity of animals, to instill fear in enemies, or to denote a spiritual connection to powerful deities. It was a deliberate act of sculpting the human into something more than human, something primal and awe-inspiring. The stakes were immense. Beyond the immediate, searing pain, there was the ever-present danger of infection, of exposing the tooth-sensitive pulp to decay, leading to agonizing abscesses, premature tooth loss, and debilitating illness. Eating would become a challenge, certainly, and the long-term health consequences were dire. Yet, the pursuit of this radical beauty, this profound declaration of identity and status, outweighed all such risks. Consider the dedication, the sheer will of individuals who willingly subjected themselves to such procedures. It was not merely vanity. It was a cultural imperative, a deeply ingrained belief that these alterations elevated them, set them apart, and connected them to something larger than themselves. To be unadorned, to possess merely natural teeth, might have been seen as a mark of the commoner, the uninitiated, the one who had not earned the right to such a profound transformation. The materials used for inlays varied, reflecting local resources and cultural significance. While jade was paramount in Mesoamerica, other cultures utilized different precious stones or metals. Jet, for example, a deep black fossilized wood, sometimes found its way into dental adornments, creating a dramatic contrast against pale skin or even existing jade inlays. The effect would have been striking, a mosaic of dark and light, hard and gleaming within the very maw. Think of the sound of these mouths. A subtle click of jade against another tooth, a faint clink of a resin-set stone. Perhaps a slight whistle through newly filed gaps. These were not silent statements. They were multisensory experiences, affecting how one spoke, how one ate, how one presented oneself to the world. A mouth of wonders indeed, but also a mouth of stark, unyielding power. These ancient beauty standards, so far removed from our own, demand our contemplation. They force us to confront the profound lengths to which humanity has always gone and continues to go, to transform the natural self into an ideal. From the porcelain masks of European courts to the jade-studded smiles of Mayan kings, the underlying impulse remains the same: to define identity, to declare status, to articulate a vision of beauty that transcends mere biology. You are left to marvel at the courage, perhaps even the recklessness, of those who willingly endured such pain for a beauty that glittered and pierced. What was it about these gleaming, altered teeth that spoke so profoundly to their souls, that made the agony a worthy price? Perhaps it was the ultimate act of control over the unpredictable body, a defiant assertion of human will against the forces of nature. Perhaps it was a visible prayer, a living offering. In these dramatic transformations of the human mouth, we find a stark mirror reflecting our own contemporary obsessions. While we may no longer drill holes into our teeth for jade or file them into points, our pursuit of perfect, often artificially whitened and straightened smiles, of veneers and invisible aligners, echoes a similar drive. We seek to perfect, to enhance, to align with an idealized vision of beauty, often at considerable financial and sometimes physical cost. The legacy of the jade-studded smile, the fanged grin, is not merely a historical curiosity. It is a powerful narrative about the human spirit's capacity for endurance, for artistry, and for the relentless pursuit of an ideal. It reminds us that beauty is not static. It is a cultural construct, a dynamic, often brutal force that shapes lives, defines societies, and pushes the boundaries of what is considered acceptable, what is considered divine. And in the gleaming, transformed teeth of the ancients, you can still hear the silent, agonizing whisper of a world that dared to redefine the very essence of human perfection. The human fascination with the teeth, that intimate gateway to expression and survival, stands as a stark testament to our desire for transformation. Yet, what if the canvas for such profound redefinition expanded beyond the bone, beyond the gleaming smile, to encompass the entire living, breathing expanse of human skin? Imagine a world where beauty was not merely adorned but carved, not polished but etched. A world where the body itself became a living tapestry, its stories written not in ink, but in scar tissue, a testament to endurance, identity, and an almost unfathomable dedication to an ideal. This is the realm of scarification, a practice as ancient as humanity itself, a radical art form that transcends mere aesthetics, delving deep into the very core of what it means to belong, to suffer, to truly become. It is a journey into an understanding of beauty that for many remains utterly alien, a concept both terrifying and profoundly sacred. Consider the young man, trembling on the precipice of adulthood, in a village nestled deep within the verdant embrace of the African rainforest. His elders, faces etched with wisdom and their own permanent markers of status, observe him. This is not a choice but a destiny. The moment arrives. The air grows thick with anticipation, with the scent of fear and something far older, something elemental. A sharp blade, perhaps of obsidian or iron, honed to a razor's edge, descends. It is not swift and clean like a surgeon's cut. It is deliberate, controlled, yet agonizingly slow. The skin parts. A gasp stifled. Blood beads, then flows, a stark crimson against the dark canvas of his flesh. With each precise incision, with each deliberate lift and peel of the dermis, the boy feels his childhood fall away, replaced by a searing pain that promises to forge him anew. This is the initiation, the ritual passage. For countless cultures across Africa, Oceania, and parts of the Americas, scarification was not a mere decoration. It was the crucible of identity. It was the moment a child became a warrior, a girl became a woman, an outsider became a member of the tribe. The pain was not a flaw in the process, but its very essence. It was a test of courage, a purification of the spirit, a public declaration of one's willingness to endure, to sacrifice, to earn their place. To flinch, to cry out, to show weakness, was to fail not only the ritual but oneself and one's lineage. The scars, once healed, were proof of resilience, a visible biography of battles fought, both internal and external. But these marks were more than just proof of endurance. They were masterpieces of design, intricate maps of lineage, status, and spiritual connection. Imagine the Nuba people of Sudan, whose bodies blossomed with raised patterns, each swelling line and circle meticulously crafted to signify beauty, health, and a successful harvest. For them, a smooth, unadorned skin was not just plain, it was incomplete, lacking the visual language that spoke of a person's worth and journey. The scars enhanced the musculature, created a tactile dimension, turning the body into a living sculpture. Or look to the Sepik River region of Papua New Guinea, where young men underwent crocodile scarification, an excruciating transformation designed to mimic the scaly hide of the revered predator. This was not a quick series of cuts. It was an ordeal stretching over weeks or even months, with hundreds, sometimes thousands, of small deep incisions made into the skin. As the wounds healed, irritating substances like ash or plant sap were rubbed into them to encourage keloid formation, creating raised, permanent ridges that evoked the formidable power of the crocodile, an ancestor, a spirit guide. To wear these marks was to embody the strength, the ferocity, the very essence of the animal. This was a visual prayer, a living homage, an act of becoming. This was a beauty that inspired awe, respect, and a primal recognition of power. The techniques employed in scarification were as varied as the cultures that practiced them, yet all shared a common thread: the deliberate manipulation of the body's healing process to create a lasting, raised mark. Some used sharp blades of stone, bone, or metal to incise designs. Others employed burning, creating patterns with controlled heat. Still others relied on techniques like cicatrization, where the skin was repeatedly picked or pricked to encourage the formation of thick, raised welts. In some instances, thorns or splinters were inserted under the skin and left for days, ensuring a pronounced scar. The goal was always to provoke a deliberate, visible scar, not merely a faint line. The more pronounced, the more raised, the more dramatic the texture, the greater its aesthetic and symbolic value. To understand this beauty, you must momentarily suspend your Western notions of smooth, unblemished skin as the epitome of perfection. For these ancient civilizations, an unscarred body might be seen as immature, uninitiated, lacking character. It was the canvas awaiting its masterpiece. The skin, far from being something to protect from imperfection, was seen as a dynamic medium, a living material capable of holding profound meaning. It was a public canvas, its art speaking volumes about the individual and their place in the cosmic order. Think of the emotional weight carried by such marks. A scar could tell the story of a successful hunt, a victorious battle, the number of children born, or a deep spiritual connection to a deity or ancestor. Each line, each raised bump, was a word in a silent language, a chapter in a living history book. It was a form of body modification that was utterly permanent, a lifelong declaration. There was no going back, no regretting a youthful impulse. These marks were etched onto the very fabric of being, defining who you were, who you had become, and who you would always be. The contrast with our modern pursuit of seamless, erased imperfections could not be starker. While we meticulously remove scars, fill wrinkles, and smooth away any perceived flaw, these cultures actively sought to create them. They understood that sometimes true beauty, true strength, and true identity are not found in an absence of marks, but in their deliberate presence. They understood that the body, in its raw, living state, was an opportunity for profound artistry, for a dialogue between the individual and their community, between the temporal and the eternal. In the intricate patterns of keloids, in the deliberately raised welts that adorned faces and torsos, we see not a perverse fascination with pain, but a profound reverence for transformation. We witness the human spirit's unwavering commitment to belonging, to distinction, and to the creation of meaning through the most visceral of canvases, our own flesh. These are not merely scars. They are sacred texts, dramatic declarations, etched in skin, whispering across centuries, reminding us that the pursuit of beauty in its most extreme forms has always been a journey into the heart of what it means to be human. It is a journey often fraught with agony, yet illuminated by a transcendent purpose, a purpose that dared to turn suffering into the ultimate expression of self. From the agony of self-inflicted wounds, from the sacred texts etched in skin, humanity's journey through beauty's strange landscapes takes an astonishing turn. It shifts from the raw declaration of belonging through pain, to a silent, relentless pursuit of a different kind of perfection, a divine blueprint etched not with tools of ritual, but with the hammer and chisel of discipline, philosophy, and a profound, almost terrifying idealism. We move from the vivid, undeniable presence of the marked body to the sculpted, idealized form, where every curve, every sinew, every subtle shift of weight tells a story of aspiration, a whisper of the gods themselves. Ancient Greece, the cradle of Western thought, presented a vision of beauty so potent, so pervasive, that it continues to echo through the corridors of our modern consciousness. Here, the body was not merely a vessel for the soul, nor a canvas for tribal identity. It was a living, breathing testament to the highest ideals of humanity, a physical manifestation of virtue, intellect, and divine grace. This was the ideal of Kalokagathia, the seamless fusion of the beautiful and the good. To be physically flawless was to be morally upright, intellectually keen, a citizen worthy of the polis, a hero in the making. The stakes were impossibly high. Your very essence, your worth in the eyes of society and the gods, could be read in the lines of your physique. Imagine a culture where your body was your most public statement, a living sculpture judged against the very forms of the Olympian deities. This was not a casual aspiration. It was a societal imperative, a relentless, unspoken pressure. For the Greek man, particularly the Athenian, the gymnasium was not just a place of exercise. It was a temple of transformation, a crucible where boys became men, where citizens were forged. Here, under the blazing Mediterranean sun, men stripped away their cloaks, their social distinctions, and their inhibitions to train in the nude. This was not about shame. It was about transparency, about the honest display of one's physical form, a form that was constantly honed, admired, and critiqued. The oiled skin, glistening with sweat, muscles taut from wrestling and running, became a canvas of striving, a testament to the individual's dedication to excellence, to arete. The obsession was profound. Philosophers like Plato spoke of the body as a reflection of the soul, urging citizens to care for it as a sacred trust. A strong, healthy body was indicative of a disciplined mind, a harmonious spirit. Conversely, a weak or poorly maintained physique might suggest a lack of self-control, a moral failing, a less than ideal citizen. This was a brutal judgment, a silent condemnation etched into the very flesh. The overweight, the underdeveloped, the physically ungraceful found themselves implicitly, if not explicitly, categorized as lesser, somehow unworthy of the full ideals of their society. The male form in particular became the supreme artistic and philosophical subject. Sculptors did not merely reproduce reality, they perfected it. They sought the ideal, the divine archetype that lay beyond mere mortal flesh. Think of Polykleitos' Dorophorus, the spear-bearer. This was not a portrait of a specific man, but a living embodiment of the canon, a mathematical treatise on perfect human proportions. Every measurement, every angle, every subtle shift of weight in the contrapposto stance was meticulously calculated, designed to achieve an unparalleled sense of balance, harmony, and inherent dynamism. It was a man, yes, but a man elevated to the realm of the gods, his muscles rippling with an effortless power, his gaze serene, embodying a perfect synergy of physical strength and intellectual calm. This ideal was not confined to marble. It was a living, breathing aspiration. Athletes competed in the Panhellenic Games, the Olympics, the Pythian, the Nemean, the Isthmian, for the glory of victory, for the olive wreath, for the enduring fame that came with physical supremacy. These were contests of strength, speed, and endurance, yes, but also of beauty. The victorious athlete was not just powerful. He was beautiful, a living testament to the gods' favor and his own unyielding will. His body, sculpted through years of rigorous training, became a public spectacle of human potential, a fleeting glimpse of the divine. The beauty of the female form was approached with a different, often more reserved, reverence. While male nudes were common and celebrated in public art, female nudity was more constrained, appearing primarily in depictions of goddesses or mythological figures. Yet, the same principles of proportion, grace, and an almost ethereal beauty applied. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, was often depicted with a sensuous, yet perfectly balanced form, embodying an ideal of feminine fertility and allure that was both earthly and divine. Her beauty was often less about overt musculature and more about harmonious curves, delicate features, and a serene presence, yet equally unattainable for the average mortal. The pursuit of this aesthetic was all-encompassing. It shaped diet, exercise, even clothing choices. A man's cloak, for example, was often worn strategically to reveal the powerful legs and toned torso beneath. The very air of Greek society was charged with this aesthetic judgment, a constant comparison to the flawless statues that populated their temples and public squares. This was not merely about looking good, it was about being good, about striving for a state of physical and moral excellence that was believed to align one with the cosmos itself. But beneath this gleaming surface of perfection lay a profound, perhaps bizarre, demand. This was not a beauty standard that offered comfort or acceptance for the average. It was a standard of idealization, of a form so perfect it bordered on the divine, a blueprint for humanity that few could ever truly inhabit. To live in a society where your physical being was so inextricably linked to your moral worth, where the very statues in the agora mocked your imperfections with their unyielding perfection, must have been a crushing weight. The psychological pressure to constantly strive, to train, to refine, to diet, to embody this impossible ideal, was a form of suffering as potent, if not as visibly brutal, as any tribal scarification. Consider the young men of Athens, standing naked in the gymnasium, their bodies scrutinized by elders, by peers, by the demanding eyes of their own ambition. Every perceived flaw, every deviation from the ideal, carried a weight of judgment. This was a society that revered the beautiful, and, by extension, implicitly devalued the unbeautiful. It fostered a relentless drive for physical excellence, not just for personal pride, but for civic honor, for philosophical purity, for an almost spiritual alignment with the divine order. In the end, the Greek aesthetic of the physique, while glorifying the human form, also created an almost insurmountable barrier between the ideal and the real. It was a standard that demanded a superhuman effort, a constant, lifelong dedication to sculpting one's flesh into a vessel worthy of the gods. This was not merely beauty, it was a moral doctrine, a philosophical statement, a relentless quest for a harmony so profound, so perfect, that it transformed the human body into a symbol of both aspiration and unattainable divinity. It was a silent suffering, a constant striving, a testament to humanity's endless, sometimes harrowing pursuit of what it means to be truly excellent, truly beautiful, truly human. And in that pursuit, in that relentless drive for a physical ideal that bordered on the impossible, lies a beauty standard as bizarre and demanding as any scarification, for it demanded the sculpting of the soul alongside the sinew. Yet, if the body was a canvas for the soul, a testament to divine aspiration, what then of the crown it bore? What of the hair, that seemingly pliable, yet profoundly symbolic, natural adornment? For in realms far older, in empires of sand and sun, hair was not merely an accessory. It was an edifice, a declaration, a burden of unimaginable weight, woven with ambition and the raw threads of power. In ancient civilizations, the head became a pedestal, upon which humanity placed its most dramatic and at times, most bizarre expressions of status, piety, and an almost brutal pursuit of an idealized self. Journey now to the golden sands of ancient Egypt, a land where the sun beat down with relentless ferocity, and the air itself teemed with unseen life. Here, practicality often dictated the earliest forms of adornment. To shave one's head was not a sign of mourning, but of immaculate hygiene, a defense against the omnipresent threat of lice and the stifling heat. Yet, upon these smoothly shaven skulls, Egyptians placed creations of breathtaking artistry and staggering weight. Wigs. Not simple coverings, but elaborate, sculpted marvels that transformed the wearer into a walking monument of authority and wealth. Imagine the pharaoh or a powerful queen, their natural hair meticulously shorn, replaced by a dense, intricate helmet of human hair, or sometimes plant fibers, wool, or even palm leaves. These wigs were not merely worn. They were constructed, painstakingly woven onto mesh bases, lacquered with beeswax and resin, and then styled with an almost architectural precision. They cascaded in thousands of tiny braids, or lay in perfectly sculpted tiers of curls, often extending to the shoulders, sometimes even down the back. Each strand spoke of 1,000 hours of labor, 1,000 silent slaves. But the spectacle did not end there. Adorning the apex of these magnificent coiffures were often cones crafted from scented animal fat. As the relentless Egyptian sun warmed the wearer throughout the day, these cones would slowly, delicately melt, releasing streams of fragrant oils and perfumes that would coat the wig, dripping down the wearer's face and neck, enveloping them in a cloud of intoxicating aroma. It was a multi-sensory display of opulence, a living perfumery on one's head. The paradox was stark. Beneath the elaborate wig, a shaved head. A choice for cleanliness, for comfort in the searing heat, yet it led to the necessity of an artificial hairpiece that, by all accounts, was anything but comfortable. These were not light, airy creations. They were heavy, hot, and rigid, a constant reminder of the societal expectations that bound even the most powerful. To wear such a crown was to physically bear the weight of one's position, an ever-present pressure on the skull, a silent testament to the lengths one would go for the sake of divine representation and human dominance. The wig was not merely hair, it was an aura, a declaration that screamed, "I am not just human. I am elevated. I am divine." Across the Fertile Crescent in the sprawling empires of Mesopotamia, a different obsession took root. Here, among the Assyrians and Babylonians, the ideal for men was not a shaved head, but a cascade of voluminous, perfectly coiffed facial and head hair. Beards in particular were not just natural growths. They were artistic statements, symbols of virility, wisdom, and connection to the gods themselves. Look upon the ancient reliefs, the mighty kings of Assyria, the fearsome warriors, the even more majestic deities. Every man, every god, is depicted with a beard and hair of almost supernatural grandeur. Their beards are not wild or untamed, but arranged in tightly wound spirals, meticulous curls that descend in rows, often reaching their chests. Their head hair mirrors this aesthetic, falling in thick ringlet-like patterns, framing their faces with an almost divine symmetry. This was no natural growth. This was the product of endless hours of grooming, of heating and curling tongs, of oils and waxes, painstakingly applied to achieve that unyielding, almost sculptural perfection. And when nature fell short, as it inevitably did for mere mortals attempting to emulate the gods, then artifice stepped in. False beards, made of human hair or wool, were fashioned and attached. Wigs, often as elaborate as those in Egypt, augmented or replaced natural hair, granting the wearer the idealized, godlike appearance demanded by their culture and position. To have such a beard, such hair, was to wear one's power visibly, to radiate an almost intimidating masculinity and a direct lineage to the divine order. It was a bizarre, almost suffocating standard, a relentless pursuit of a look that was more sculpture than biology, more symbol than self. As the wheel of empire turned, so too did the obsessions of beauty. Fast forward to the bustling, often decadent heart of ancient Rome. Here, in a society obsessed with status, display, and an almost insatiable appetite for the new, hair became a battleground of fashion, a towering testament to wealth and social ambition. For Roman women, especially during the imperial era, simple styles gave way to creations of staggering height and complexity. The 1st century AD, particularly during the Flavian dynasty, saw the rise of coiffures that defied gravity and reason. Imagine a Roman matron, her hair piled high above her forehead, not in gentle waves, but in a structured, often terrifyingly rigid cascade of tight curls, sometimes resembling a wasp's nest, sometimes an intricate orb. This was not merely styled hair, it was architectural, a veritable fortress of curls, often extending forward from the forehead in a terrifyingly precarious overhang. To achieve such impossible volume and height, Roman women, particularly those of the upper classes, relied heavily on artifice. Wigs were ubiquitous not just to cover thinning hair but to add mass, to create entirely new silhouettes. Hairpieces, known as gallery, were crafted from the hair of enslaved people, often fair-haired captives from Germanic lands, whose natural blonde locks were highly prized and fetched exorbitant prices. These false pieces were carefully integrated into the natural hair, supported by pins, frames, and hidden padding. The process was an ordeal. Hours, perhaps an entire morning, would be spent in the hands of an ornatrix, an enslaved hairdresser whose skill and speed could make or break a woman's social standing. These women, armed with hot curling irons, dyes made from henna or plant extracts, and intricate tools, would meticulously sculpt and pin, often pulling and tugging, causing considerable pain to their mistresses. Blonde hair, often achieved through a harsh bleaching process involving goat fat and wood ash, was particularly fashionable, a stark contrast to the natural dark hair of most Roman women, demanding even more aggressive and damaging treatments. To wear such a towering, intricate coiffure was a clear, undeniable statement of one's wealth and status. It proclaimed that one had the leisure to spend hours on one's appearance, the resources to employ skilled slaves, and the means to acquire expensive foreign hair. It was an aesthetic of excess, a visual manifestation of a culture that valued display above all else. But it was also a heavy crown to bear, literally and figuratively. The constant weight, the heat, the discomfort of hundreds of pins, the hours of stillness, the pain of styling, all contributed to a silent suffering behind the spectacular facade. From the scented wigs of the Nile to the towering tresses of Rome, and the divine beards of Mesopotamia, these ancient beauty standards reveal a common thread: humanity's relentless drive to transcend the natural, to sculpt the self into a powerful, idealized image. Hair, seemingly so malleable, became a rigid symbol, a declaration of who one was, or who one aspired to be, in a world where every detail carried profound meaning. It was a bizarre and demanding form of self-expression, a heavy crown of ambition, status, and silent sacrifice, worn not just upon the head, but deep within the very fabric of ancient life. The struggle was not just for beauty, but for power, for belonging, for a fragile, temporary glimpse of the divine.